Most people think about the Akashic Records as this giant cosmic filing cabinet in the universe that you have to be super special and perfectly attuned to get to. And that's not what it is to me. I see it as a place to get a deeper understanding of your patterns and your fears and your blocks. And today I want to share with you what the Akashic Records really are in my perspective, maybe what they aren't, and how to access them on your own. Hi, I'm Jackie Smith, and you are listening to Chats with Aunt Jackie. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and my experience within the Akashic Records. I am an author, I'm a teacher, I'm an Akashic Record explorer, I'm a candle maker, a recovering entrepreneur, and a guide through the strange and beautiful intersections of magic and practical life and personal transformation. And today we're going to talk about the Akashic Records. And I'm not going from a textbook or someone else's teaching. I'm going to go from my experience of working with the Akashic Records, teaching them, doing readings, and watching what happens when people discover that they have access to more wisdom and more healing than they. And so I'm going to take you on this journey with me on my story about the Akashic Records. And any good story needs to start at the beginning. It needs to start at how I found my Akashic Records. And I found the Akashic Records in general. And I've been reading now for 35, 40 years as a psychic. And it was about 20 years ago when I stumbled upon the Akashic Records, or should I say the Akashic Records found me. Now, in my journey as a psychic, it's always been really important that I read accurately, that I give you information that you need, not just tell a tale and hopefully it works out, but give you the meaning and the reason behind what's happening in your life, to give you solutions. And early on, I started in my prayers before beginning a reading is to ask to move my ego aside, to move my judgment aside, and to move my limitations to the side so I could help my client find deeper meaning for what's going on. And I would do that by asking to flow into the stream of all knowledge. And I think that was my introduction to the Akashic Records. That's where it began. So then one day when I had been booked to do readings and classes in Massachusetts at Zuzu's Healing Arts, which is now an amazing psychic fair that she puts on a couple of times a year. And she had lined up like 10 or 15 clients for me in a row, of course, with a lunch break, thank God, and lots of water. And I was prepping for this because this was at that point the most amount of people I had read continuously in a day. I mean, this was a lot. And so I said my prayers and I set myself up and did my meditation. And I did the same thing. Like, I need to ask for all this information to be lined up for me so I can go through this without like feeling sick at the end of the day or completely drained. So the first reading sat down, and I always make a heart-to-heart connection with my client and have my guides connect to your guides so the information is clear and smooth and accurate. And you know, your guides know everything there is to know about you. And so if it comes through my guides, then the information comes faster. But this day it happened even faster than that. Because once I made that heart-to-heart connection with my client, I found myself like shifting. I felt a big, like my whole body shifted. And I felt myself in a different space, and it had a different energy to it. And it was cleaner and crisper, and the information was coming faster. And just making that connection, all of a sudden I was getting all this information on the client, but not just what was happening in their life, why it was happening, what the origin of it, what's the seed or the root of what was going on. And I paused for a moment and I said, where am I, guys? I don't know where I am. I want to make sure that I'm in a place of higher information, of universal information, and not some primal, here's what I'm afraid of information. And a voice in my head said, you're in the Akashic Records. And I'd heard of that word before. I hadn't really paid attention to it, but I really didn't know what the Akashic Records were. I mean, when someone says the Akashic Records, you have like a basic understanding. You can assume what it means, but I didn't really know what it meant. And so I went with it. And I did those readings, somewhere between 10 and 15 readings. And I started my readings at 10 o'clock in the morning. Some were hour-long readings, some were half hour. And I didn't leave until almost 7 o'clock at night. I was booked solid. But by the end of that, where I'm normally drained and I can barely keep my eyes open, I was awake and vibrant and ready and excited. And I'm like, what is happening? This is amazing. I need to know more about this. And each client, I tapped into their Akashic Records. And it was an amazing experience, is that as I started understanding what was happening and what I was doing, and that I would see a door and together we would go in through the door, and then I would see things in the Akashic Records. They were all so unique, and it was a personal experience for each individual. There's versions of this within each person, and it comes up differently. I mean, some people had like the library, which is so fun. I love a big library and all those books. But then sometimes it was a forest, or one time it was the bottom of the ocean, or a crystal cave. And each time one time it was grandma's cottage. And so there's all this ancestral information coming through. So this is why it was so exciting, and I was so jazzed about it. And at the end of that day, I was staying with my sister, so I went back to her place, and my other sister was there too. And we're all psychics, and we all talk about this stuff. I couldn't wait to share this experience with them. And my one sister, Nancy, had already been working a little bit with the Akashic Records, which was a surprise to me. And my sister, Patty, who we do a lot of healing work together, she's like, oh, I want to learn more. Let's go. And so it took me on a brand new journey. I needed to understand this. I mean, as a person with 7 planets in Virgo, I need to understand the system before I trust the system. And so we looked and we researched and we said, what are the Akashic Records? What is this thing that I'm doing? And I needed to understand like where this word came from. I understood that it's Hindu, and I understood Sanskrit, but I needed to know why. And I needed to make sure that I wasn't just jumping into something I had no business being in. But in my research, what I learned is that there is a version of the Akashic Records by other names in most spiritual and religious traditions. There is a greater cosmic knowledge that is unique to each person. Of course, Akashic, the word Akasha means ether or space. So it's your own sacred space that you're in. And then Madame Blavatsky brought those Eastern philosophies to the Western world. And she didn't do a great job honoring where it came from. But that's a whole nother show with a whole nother piece of information. And so I didn't want to appropriate this. I wanted to honor this and understand it, because there's such a beautiful, deep, amazing spiritual tradition in the Hindu tradition. And I'm just in love with the people from India and the Hindu tradition, that I'm always honored when I get a chance to learn with any of them. And, it is one of my dreams to be able to go there and learn from some reputable people in that tradition. But in Judaism, they have the Book of Life, and I'm going to totally tank this pronunciation, but it's called the Sefer Hashim. And that's where the names and destiny are recorded in God's Book of Life. And that is aligned with the Tree of Life and the Sephiras, with the top 3, which is, again, another whole show, or maybe that's another whole class on the Akashic Records, of how there's the experience of the records, the seeing of the records, and the recording of the records. And then in Christianity, there's the Book of Life, even Moses' Book of Names. And he would talk about when he went to the mountain, he said, I will strike your name from the God's Book of Names. In Islam, there is the preserved tablet. That's understood as the divine record of what God has decreed your life to be, or your spirit, your soul to be. And then it goes on and on. I mean, there's Edgar Cayce with his Book of Remembrances that stays in the Judeo-Christian following. And then there's, in the Norse tradition, there is the Well of Urd and the Norns, who shape and weave fate beneath the tree. It's not necessarily a record book per se, but a pattern of fate and memory. Then there's the Celtic Well of Wisdom, Cauldron of Inspiration, which is known as Caradwyn's Cauldron, which is a place of knowledge, prophecy, transformation. So do you see how there's this overarching pattern through time and space around the world, that there is an agreement that there is a greater wisdom that encompasses everything, and we all have our own history of our soul's existence. And knowing this and understanding this just was so fascinating. Even in the indigenous traditions of America, with the sacred hoop and the medicine wheel, has like a flavor to that. It's not exactly the same, but it tells the tale of that there is a greater wisdom of how everything connects. And every culture has this idea that wisdom lives beyond us and beyond our ordinary mind in a greater space. And that can't be ignored. I mean, there's something here when everybody's talking about it. There's something going on. And humans have always reached for a greater understanding. Even in ancient times when they would try and figure out why the rivers flood or there's lightning or women die in childbirth or don't die in childbirth, we need a greater understanding. So we've always reached for that. And we've always held inside ourselves that there's something larger, something greater that is more common than not. And so when people ask me what the Akashic Records are, my answer is often they're not what you think. They're the record of your soul's entire existence from lifetime to lifetime through all dimensions. Every wish you've made, every intention you've set out there, every conversation you've had, including the conversations with yourself, all of your fears and anxieties and the reason for them all live within the Akashic Records. And what they're not is equally as important as what they are. They're not prediction. They're not fortune telling. They're not going to tell you when you're going to get your new job, but they are going to talk about the path that you're on to find that new job and what maybe some probabilities are if you do X, Y, and Z. But it's more like, why are you looking for a new job? What is your soul calling for? What is your destiny calling for? They're a tool of understanding of what your life is about. And goodness knows, the Akashic Records are not a replacement for common sense. They're not the thing that you go to, the Akashic Records told me I was going to do this. I mean, you still are living in this life and you still need to work with the same common sense that you need to work with without the Akashic Records. Once you start getting into reading the Akashic Records and tapping into them, they are not permission to invade someone's privacy, because the Akashic Records are the ultimate safe space for your soul and spirit, because they're yours and only yours. And I look at them as how we kind of interface with each other. Like if I need wisdom and information, my Akashic Record connects with this Akashic Record, connects with that one. And so I ask for this information to come to us. You can do some quantum jumping, which again is a whole nother show, but it is your sacred space and it is sacrosanct, meaning that other people can't tap into it. What they can do is they can see how your Akashic Records interface with each other. And so if I was to look at your Akashic Records from a distance, I can only see where we interface. And really what's happening is I'm getting a mirror back to me of how I interact with you and what the purpose of our interactions are together. But I can't spy on you. Nobody can tap into your Akashic Records without your permission. Consent is 1000%. It is required. As a reader, I always ask, do I have your permission to read your Akashic Records? And then when people go, yeah, I said, no, I need you to say that I have your permission to read your Akashic Records. Consent has to be deliberate. I am not a fan, and I get really irritated with ambush readings because I didn't give you consent. And there's times when I was first playing with the Akashic Records, I thought, well, let me see what's going on with my daughter because she's unhappy about some things right now. I wanted to look into her Akashic Records, and then I got this big message, you shall not pass. I'm like trying to look into my husband's Akashic Records. Why are we arguing? Trying to look at my daughter's Akashic Records, and it's like, well, you may not go there. You don't have consent. You don't have consent with us. And I went, okay, well, can I just peek? Can I just see what's happening? But the only answer I got is how we interact, how we interface. So it's like a Venn diagram of my records and somebody else's records. And there's this little thin space of how our lives connect. And I can only look at that in the perspective of myself. And as a reader, when I get consent from my client, I kind of travel with them, but not fully into their Akashic Records. I'm speaking with the Akashic Record keepers. I'm speaking with their guides, and I'm guiding them with the imagery that's coming to me from what they consented. So as an Akashic Record guide, as it were, I asked to go to the Grand Akashic Record room and ask that this is where we do work. And I'm only there to do work. And there's a lot of things I cannot see. If it's not relevant to the reading, we don't go there. And then when we're done, I kind of forget everything we did. That's why I got to take notes. So when I meet my client again, I can pull out my notes, go, oh yeah, we did all these things, because it leaves my head. And that means that I have made a disconnect, the appropriate disconnect. Like I said, one of the things that I just really gets in my craw is ambush readings. That's when I haven't given consent for someone to read me. And we see them on TV, the psychic mediums that'll just go up to someone in the grocery store and talk about their grandma, which we know is set up. But when I've had some experiences, I had this one experience where a medium is practicing her trade, and going through classes, and she said, I'm getting a message from your mom. And my mom had died the year prior, and we had a contentious relationship. It wasn't the best. And I was doing my healing over that process. And I said, I'm not interested in a message from my mom at this time. Maybe in a couple years, I'll let you know when I'm ready. And she goes, well, no, she's bothering me. She won't stop talking to me. She has to give you this message. And I'm like, I really don't want it. I'm not in a good space. My mom just died like less than a year ago. No, I take it back. She had died probably 6 months prior to that. And it was less than a year. And this medium was really insistent. And I finally said, okay, fine. What does she got to say? And she said, I see all these balloons, and she's celebrating you, and she's very happy for you and what you're doing. And I said, nice. It would have been nice if she told me in my lifetime rather than putting me down and saying crappy things about me every time I saw her. So I'm going to pass on that information. I'm going to tell you how much that hurts me right now because I am in my process of grieving and healing. So I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with this message, and I'm not okay with you insisting that you give me this message from my mom. Come to find out, I wasn't paying attention. The next day was my mother's birthday. That's what the balloons were about. It was still about her. And I was so mad, and I went to the medium later and I said, I need to give you the results of what you gave me and how it's not okay that you did this to me. I am not okay right now. I am back in some bad places in my mind, and I need to work on it and rework some of this healing. You opened up a wound that I wasn't ready to open up. And that was a big lesson for her, a big lesson for me. But one of my beliefs is that once you tap into and give voice to things that you see, psychically, mediumship, and the Akashic Records, you're giving it life. You're giving it more energy. So I'm very careful. It's like opening Pandora's box. I'm very careful, and I ask for guidance on what can be said and what can't be said and how to say it to the person that they can receive it. So in a nutshell on that one, the Akashic Records aren't interested in helping you spy on other people. They're interested in helping you find your own deeper truth and deeper ways to understand yourself. And you're listening to Chats with Aunt Jackie, and I am Jackie Smith. And today we're talking about the Akashic Records, intuition, and how we learn to trust deeper wisdom. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you follow, subscribe, and share this with somebody else who loves these conversations. And so that brings me to thinking about the difference between psychic and Akashic Records and intuition. And they are different. They're kind of like different levels of what you're going on. Every psychic is very intuitive. So people are very intuitive, not knowing that they're psychic. So that intuition is that like quick knowing, that flash of insight. It's those gut feelings. It's immediate answers. And then on a psychic level, that's where you get images and symbols and bigger information, energy perception. Mediumship is when you talk to the different spirits around someone that needed to bring a message to them. Mediumship and psychic abilities are two different things. So when you're reading someone, you're reading what's going on with them. But when you're a medium, you're talking to the spirit that wants to talk to them. So you're not passing judgment or tapping into that person. You're only talking to that spirit. But then Akashic Records, when you tap into them, you're getting patterns. You're getting context. You're getting the backstory and the bigger meaning. You're getting the seed wound, the root of the problem at a soul level perspective. You're getting like past lives and why these past lives matter, how they're interacting with this life. And you can do a lot of healing work in the Akashic Records. There's lots of tools there for you. There's ways to look at past lives quickly without having someone re-experience what goes on. There's ways to look at the different dimensions that somebody lives in. I mean, we have all these possible dimensions and choices in our lives, which is very quantum and again, different show. I think that'd be a fun show to do too. Get somebody who really gets the whole quantum thing. And these all, of course, overlap. There's so many psychics who tap into the Akashic Records without calling them that. And that doesn't mean they're not doing it. It doesn't mean that it's not there and they're tapping into their client at a deeper level. They're getting deeper, life-changing information, pattern information. And just like somebody who is very intuitive but is not admitting they're psychic, you still are. You might not call it that, but you're still getting all those messages. And just like a medium is also very psychic. And some psychics have moments of mediumship. I'm not a medium. It's not a thing that I pursue as a practice, but I do have times of mediumship when I really tune in to the spirit that's around somebody that has a message for them. And the labels matter less than the quality of the information. So don't worry about which label you are, but everybody wants to know the difference between going into the Akashic Records and being, and I don't want to use this word but just psychic, because they're all there. They're all varying levels. So the Akashic Records, I look at them as a different part of our energy, a part of our soul. Just like we have a dream dimension that talks to us and unpacks the things that we experience through the day, or any fears or anxieties, or just garbage in, garbage out, which is most of my dreams. The Akashic Records are another part of ourselves where we have all this information, I want to say at our fingertips, but in our heart center. And we tap into it all the time. When you have those moments of brilliant insight, when you say you're struggling with a problem and then suddenly you go, I know how to do it. That's you just opening up and being willing to hear what's inside your Akashic Records. When you're struggling with something internally, emotion or thought process, or maybe a pattern you repeat in your life, and you finally get it. You finally understand, oh, I understand how to make that change. You have opened up to your Akashic Records and they're kind of leaking into your life. Big healings, same thing. And healing doesn't only happen in the Akashic Records, but when you do healing work and deep like shadow work and deal with these things, it has a representation inside your Akashic Records. And what's so cool about them is that when you start to really dive into your Akashic Records, the way they speak to you is through your imagination. And that's why I call this show, Are You Making It Up? The Akashic Records uses your imagination to communicate with you. It uses the neural pathways already in your head and the communication already in your body to show you what's going on, because it is such a grand piece of information that we're interpreting energy. We're interpreting this dynamic soul language, and it doesn't have words. It doesn't really have a language. It just has a vibe, and we need to interpret it. And so we experience it when we're doing in the Akashic Records. Sometimes we feel it in our body, like suddenly my shoulder's hurting. What's going on with that? Or we get excited or get really tired. That get really tired thing, and that like, oh, there's nothing here, is 1000% a block saying, I don't want you to look at me. Go look at something else. I'm going to make you tired instead. But it's a very symbolic place. So you're going to get symbolism through your imagination. I like to call this the playground of the gods, because the divine exists within all Akashic Records. And when you're tapping into your own Akashic Records, you are getting the feed from that, grand divine Akashic Record space of where all the divine is. So the divinity just loves to interface with you here. It loves to bring you information. And I think one of the biggest trip ups with my students and my clients is they think that they're going to see this information from the Akashic Records like they're the ghost whisperer, like they're looking at something physical in their hands. And it doesn't work like that. Maybe 1% of people who are psychic will work like that. Most information comes to you like a memory. Like you're remembering what it's like to have that first cup of coffee in the morning, or you're remembering what your favorite room is like, or you're remembering a conversation from a couple of years ago. It can be a little cloudy, but when you work on that memory, when you like, oh yeah, I remember when I was talking to Susie. Oh yeah, we were talking about this, and then this happened. And so the more you tap into it, the more you question it and ask what you're looking at, the more information it brings to you, because questions open you up to answers. If you don't ask the question, you'll never get the answer. So if you say, what is the color blue about? Why am I like imagining a blue bike? What is that about? And then more answers come to you. That's one of the best tools in the Akashic Records, is to ask a question. And when I'm with my clients, I'll ask out loud. Asking out loud actually is the tool. So I'll ask out loud, okay, I'm asking your Akashic Record keepers and healers and your divine allies what this is that I'm seeing. Why am I seeing a blue bike? What does this mean for you? And usually the client says, are you asking me? And I said, absolutely 100% if you have an answer, as well as I'm asking out loud and opening myself up to answers. When you ask a question, you're open to answers. And so sometimes it feels like you're making it up. And I just remember when I was teaching a class, and I was showing them, like, I'm having a memory. It just comes as a word. I start to tug on a word, and I looked at this one woman. I said, for example, I'm going to make a heart-to-heart connection with you. Do I have permission to connect with your Akashic Records? And she said yes. And I said, I'm just getting peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter. And she was like halfway back in the classroom, pretty far away from me. And I'm saying, I'm getting peanut butter. Why am I getting peanut butter? And she goes, well, I just ate a peanut butter sandwich. And I'm like, well, I can't smell your breath from here. So we know that this is me tuning into something. I thought I was making it up. Why in the world am I looking at a woman and saying peanut butter? And then I asked in the Akashic Records, why am I getting peanut butter as the example? And I said, because you have a stomach ache now. You are not tolerating peanuts like you used to. She goes, yeah, I kind of live on peanut butter sandwiches, especially at conventions. I just eat them the whole time. And I said, my friend, you need to stop. Because your stomach is no longer able to digest the peanuts. And so that's what they're telling me in the Akashic Records. And she goes, that's crazy because my stomach hurts so much right now. I'm fairly distracted. And then I said, well, let's ask for healing for this. Let's ask for what healing does this person need in this moment to balance out what's going on in her stomach. And I didn't really get a clear answer, but I said, I just asked for this healing to happen for you. I usually am more precise when I do healing work in the Akashic Records, but it was a class of 100 people, so I was like, what do you need right now? And she told me at the end of the class that her stomach calmed down and she was able to focus because I asked for whatever healing she needed. And of course, after that interaction, I disconnected with her. I said, I come out of your Akashic Records and I give you wholly, completely, and permanently back to you. So then I could focus on teaching the rest of the class and not have this person's needs running through my mind. And that's why it feels like you're making it up sometimes. It's the weirdest things come. And it, again, very symbolic because I know that I sometimes see aliens when I'm in my own Akashic Records or other people's Akashic Records. And I'm like, well, is this really an alien? Which is a whole nother show. Or is this very, very foreign to this person? Sometimes I see aliens because this is just so disconnected from this person. It feels foreign and alien-like. So if you decide to play in your Akashic Records and learn more about yourself, just know that it's subtle experiences. Just relax. If you go into the Akashic Records and you're like, it's dark in here, you got to use your imagination and like put your hand up and reach for the light and pull the string and the light will turn on, or reach for the light switch on the wall. You'll find it and it'll turn on. And then don't assume that it'll be like a great picture like you're watching a movie, but know that it'll be like a memory. And say, if you get stuck going into your Akashic Records, and there is an exercises in my book, DIY Akashic Wisdom, that I wrote with my sister, Patty Shaw, of exercises and meditations you can do to get into your Akashic Records. Longer prayers, then there's the quick and dirty method. I find that I was doing the longer prayers to create that spiritual muscle memory so then I can just move into it when I need to. And also in that quick and dirty method, from creating that spiritual muscle memory, a big part of that is being grounded, being in my body. It's very difficult to access Akashic Records when your client or you are not in your body. You're disconnected. And so the connection becomes frayed. So I like to set my clients up and myself up. If I'm reading my own Akashic Records, going in there to create change and healing, I make sure I'm grounded. Because if I'm not grounded, I don't get good information. What happens is I stay in my head and my imagination starts to become stories, like mental fan fiction of what's really going on. Because when you don't have information about something, your brain wants to fill the gap. And it'll fill the gap with a story that puts in facts, in air quotes, that are not there. We all do it. And you don't have to be psychic to do this. You don't have to be spiritual to do this. You just have to be human. And we all do this. I mean, think about, you get pissed off at somebody at work and you don't know what their deal is today. And so you make up a story. They're just being a jerk. And they're being this way and that way. And they're just blah, blah, blah. And if you ever get the real story from them, you realize that they were just having a bad day or they were going through something that they're going through. And if you have enough emotional maturity, you can say, that was a story I made in my head. I'm putting proof together that really doesn't go together. But if you are in the Akashic Records, you're getting the truth, the backstory, the deeper thing in your perspective. You may never know why that person at work is being a jerk, but you know why you're reacting to it rather than just letting it go. or just moving past it or saying, ugh, having a boundary. And the difference, I've learned this difference over time, is that when you're grounded, when you're rooted and you're centered within yourself, you can see what's a story and what's a deeper Akashic Record message. Stories give you anxiety. They make you angry. They make you righteous. But when you get the backstory, the heart of, or the seed of the situation, the deeper understanding, it brings you peace. It brings wisdom. You may not like it, but you get it. Like, oh, okay, I'm reacting to this person because of X, Y, and Z. So really, whatever they're experiencing in their life has nothing to do with me. And if it does have something to do with me, they're not ready to talk to me about it. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can stay in my space. And that's a huge help, really, when you're working through all these things. Just remember, if you're making up a story in your head, if you're creating that mental fan fiction, you get defensive and fearful, and it becomes very urgent. But when you are working on Akashic insight, once you're grounded and you've tapped into your Akashic records and you're working on that Akashic insight, it feels expansive. It feels compassionate and grounding in your life. So one of the things that I think is really critical to understand is why you want to go on the Akashic records. People ask me that all the time. So why in the world do I ever need to look into my Akashic records? And my answer is you don't. You don't ever need to look in your Akashic records because your Akashic records are at work in your life. You don't need to look at them consciously if you don't want to. But I tap into the Akashic records with my clients or myself because I'm feeling stuck, or I have these repeating patterns in my life, or different relationships repeat. I talk about how for the first 30 years of my life, I continued to create friendships that repeated the pattern of the relationship I had with my mother. Some people say you marry your father. My friends were my mother for so long. And once I understood I had that repeating relationship, I always end up dating the bad guy, or all these things, that's part of it. So it helps you identify the pattern that you are recreating over and over again. What's the story? What's the play? Internal play that I keep casting. And then what's the lesson on this? And then what's the next honest step? And sometimes it's not easy. But often in the records, even if it's not easy, it gives you a way to heal and shift the energy, to rewrite the narrative. That's so freeing when you're able to do that. Like, oh, this is what is happening right now. And I love how much the Akashic records are a mirror to me, and how I can look into my blind spots. I can challenge the assumptions I have about something. Although looking into your blind spots is hard, and that's what I usually recommend. If you can, get an Akashic partner, somebody who is into the Akashic records like you are, so that you can challenge each other to look deeper into the blind spots. And that's how I really got deep into the Akashic records, is with my sister Patty Shaw, and I would have weekly sessions of looking in the Akashic records. What else are we going to learn today? What else are we going to learn today? And because it helped us both go deeper and challenge each other. So the goal isn't going into the Akashic records. Really, the goal is about healing, learning about yourself, getting a deeper understanding of your own patterns, of your own blocks, fears, and anxieties, getting the whys and wherefores for all of these things, because once you understand it, you can start to create change in your daily life. The goal is the healing and the wisdom that comes from tapping into it. There isn't a special level of mastery you get for being in the Akashic Records. You don't get a new title, and there's really no cachet here. Just like, there's no cachet of remembering to take your vitamins. It's just part of healing and getting a deeper understanding of how these things work in your life and what you need. And you don't have to be a psychic to get into your Akashic Records either. I know I talked about Akashic Records are a layer of psychic ability. You don't have to be a psychic. You don't have to go on that path. You can circumvent all of that and get into your Akashic Records. So if you want to learn more about Akashic Records, there is a book that I wrote with my sister that I talked about before. It's called DIY Akashic Wisdom, and it's published through Wiser, and it's hopefully at your favorite bookstore. It's on Amazon. It's on the Coventry product site. It's on many sites. If your local store doesn't have it, I'm sure they can get it for you. And I love promoting that people shop local. Go shop in person and learn different things about new things that you never thought you would know about. And if you're interested in diving deeper into your Akashic Records, you can find me to book a session on auntjackie.com. That's Jackie without an E, AUNTJACKI.com. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to the show. Please like and subscribe wherever you are, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, or if you're Sunday at 8 p.m., tune into Para X Radio so you can just listen to the show live as you wish. Para X has got a lot of cool shows it's worth tuning into. So I wish you a deep dive into your own Akashic Records. It's okay, the waters are warm inside your Akashic Records, and they welcome you and they're waiting for you because they're yours and you can go get them. So until next time, my friends, trust your magic and keep your candles lit. If you would like to learn more about my approach to the Akashic Records, you can find my book, DIY Akashic Wisdom, information about readings, classes, and more at AuntJackie.com.